Adam Carroll, we are so excited to have you here on the Think Wise podcast. You know, we've known each other for over 20 years, and every time we're together, it's like an explosion of wisdom and insight and good times. And every single time we're together, it's like, we need to do this more. And so I'm so excited to just for our audience to get some exposure to you and to learn from you. I've learned a ton. And over the last 20 years, there's a couple of things that really stand out to me, Adam. One is your understanding about money and the good and evil about everyone's relationship with that. So I think we've got an audience that is just dying to know more about their personal relationship with money and for your insight around it. So to kick us off, why don't you tell us, how did this even become an interest or a passion from you? Where did this come from?
I wish I could tell you exactly, Richard, where my passion for money was, other than when I was a kid, I was kind of introduced to entrepreneurship, and the whole idea that I could make money by doing something and creating an idea really got me fired up. And I think it was when I was 7 or 8 years old, my mom tells a story that I baked a chocolate cake from the recipe on the side of a Cocoa can. And a neighbor was there and said, "Oh, this is delicious chocolate cake. I'm sure just putting on for a 7-year-old, you know." And I said, "I will sell you one." And then I proceeded to sell like 2 or 3 in the neighborhood and made $15 or $20 and thought I was onto something. So I think that's what got me started. But I will tell you that what kept me going in this game is I graduated from college a debt statistic. I had been a rich college kid. Lived on borrowed money, student loans, credit cards. And I quickly became a broke professional once I graduated. And I realized sort of the error of my ways and realized that if I was going to live differently, I had to live differently. And so I started really digging deep into financial literacy, my own personal financial acumen. And then it just became a passion. And I wanted to go out and teach everyone I met the same stuff I was learning.
Speaking on the student loans, what would you say to a college student who maybe has taken out loans because they were told this is what you got to do to pay for school, and then they graduate and then they later on realize the mistake they made, and they maybe feel like they kind of dug themselves a hole and they're starting from behind and they're really discouraged and they feel like their quality of life is going to be less for the rest of their life? What would you say to them?
Welcome to the club is probably what I'd say, Christian, unfortunately. Because there are so many students who find themselves, or recent grads who find themselves in that situation where they have taken on massive amounts of debt. They followed the age-old advice of go to school, get a degree, get a good job. But I did a TedX event on this, and I talked about the narrative has not changed, but the reality has changed. So the narrative is still go to school, get a degree, get a good job. But the reality is go to school, borrow handsomely to do so. You may or may not get a job in your industry in the first 5 years or 10 years, and you'll probably struggle for the first 10 or 15 years of your life financially if you follow the age-old advice. And so what I would tell them, number one, and this is from my own experience, because I left with 30,000 plus in student loans and another 10 grand almost in credit card debt. Don't hold on to it. Figure out a way out of it. If it takes 4 years to procure the debt, to acquire the debt, it shouldn't take 20 years to retire the debt. And that's what I found a lot of people will do is they'll just dutifully pay their minimum payment. But what they don't realize is that for every $1 you borrow, you pay back 2. So if you've borrowed $40,000 for a degree, you'll pay back 80 grand over 20 years if you follow, the way that the system works. And so, my message to them on a little bit lighter, more productive and hopefully optimistic note is there is a way out of the debt hole that you've dug for yourself. The answer is it lies within you. And once you figure out what your relationship to money is and your drive to make more and retire the debt, as soon as you unlock that code, you crack that code, you'll be financially free in your 30s easily. But it requires a mindset shift to get there. And I think podcasts like your guys' help people articulate exactly what that is.
Well, mindsets,
Yeah,
I think,
that's great advice.
yeah, I think mindset is really the key here. And the mindset for too many people is I want to have what I want now. And I'm not willing to go
Totally.
through the effort to go somewhere else. And unfortunately, in this situation, there's all too many people willing to give you what you need to get what you need right now. So, the student loans
Totally.
are, they're readily available, and that mindset's important. What do you think that there's a different mindset that young people have versus those who are a bit seasoned? So like high school, college, recent graduates, is there something
Yep.
that they have in their relationship with money that maybe is different from, just a season ahead?
Yeah, I think for sure we are shifting the way that we interact and exchange money. And that alone has created a massive difference in the next generation coming up and how they view things. I will say this: Gen Z and Gen Alpha that are now coming through school and maybe just graduating from college and getting their first job, they favor access over ownership. So they would rather rent a car than own a car. They would rather rent an apartment than own a home. At this point, it doesn't really make sense for them to own when they can just have access to it. And I think this is why Airbnb and certainly Airbnb has caught on. The new ride sharing app where you can rent out your car. That's a big deal for folks. Obviously, this is the Uber age. They grew up understanding what Uber is and was, how it operates. But most importantly, it's the introduction and adoption of things like Zelle and Venmo. Certainly PayPal was a generation before, but we didn't necessarily have the ability to tap our phones together or tap a watch to a screen and automatically transfer funds. And so as a result of that, on the negative side, I think the relationship to money is one that's not based in tangibility. It's based in this level of abstraction around money. So it exists, but it purely exists in the ether. It doesn't exist as paper currency. Christian, I would ask you, how many of your friends actually carry cash on a daily basis?
Yeah, not very many at all, like me included.
Yeah. And why, just out of curiosity, why is that? What is your reason for not?
I think it's just the fact that Venmo is so easy. And so Venmo and, Apple Pay, it's like it's less things to carry, less things to put in your pocket. And in a way, like it feels more painless to just Venmo my roommate for dinner, or it's just a number on a screen, even though, I know that's money coming out of my account. It's a little less painless or a little less painful than, handing them the $20 bill.
Indeed. And I think that's part of the, we're in a double-edged sword kind of situation with money today, because I think on the plus side, wow, how amazing is it that we can tap a phone or our watch, and in some cases a fingerprint. On some campuses, if you put your fingerprint on a reader, you can get into the dining center. Students that I've talked to don't know that costs somewhere between $7 and $17 every time they do it. That's an abstraction. It's awesome that it's so simple and streamlined. And Christian, you mentioned it's painless. There's no friction involved in transferring money back and forth. The negative side of that is that if you had a $50 bill and you were buying something for $50, there's a part of your brain that lights up that's actually a pain sensor when you hand over a $50 or $100 bill. So I'll meet people. Richard, you probably still carry cash, don't you? You and I are old school.
Yeah. And I hold on to it as long as I can.
So if you had $100 bill, it might feel like, I don't really want to break this because I like holding $100. It's tangible. It feels good. There's value in it. But a pain sensor lights up when we hand that over, where a pleasure sensor lights up in our brain when we hit $47 one-click ship on Amazon. And it's a weird dichotomy around money. But young people today, what they have to do is they really have to fundamentally understand that they are spending real money when they Venmo someone, when they go out to eat, when they buy. And I tell my kids this all the time. Listen, if you bought a soda at a restaurant, every single time you dined, you went out to lunch or dinner with your friends, and you did it twice a day for 5 days, that's 10 times that you spent $2.50 to $3 on a soda. That's $30 a week you're probably spending on a beverage that you could go get a 6-pack for $2.50. I mean, these are the kinds of things that we have to bring to the tangible forefront, as opposed to just like, well, it's easy, so I'm just going to swipe my card. And yeah, it was $3 or $3.50 or whatever. I don't know. I didn't really pay attention to it. When we're young, we actually have to pay closer attention to our money than when we're older and we're making more. It's like we can actually afford to pay less attention. So I would challenge your listeners to get really intentional about where and how and why you're spending money now in your younger years, so you can be completely frivolous with your money later, and it doesn't really matter. Like it's your kids who are going to suffer from that, not you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. And this is great. This is definitely something specifically that I wanted to bring up, talking about Venmo and Zelle and everything like that. And I think the reality is these things aren't going away, and they're probably only going to get more and more advanced, and transferring money is only going to get easier and easier. So Another question I'd have for you is like, what are some practical ways that you would say young people can avoid the negative effects of things like Venmo? Like, would you recommend, hey, if you feel like you're overspending with your phone, just like delete the apps and go get cash? Or like, what would you say?
If it is a struggle, if you find yourself perpetually overdrawing, you're using your debit card or you're Venmoing so much that you have no idea how much is going in or out. Obviously, you can go back and look at transactions, but I would question, how many times a week does someone go back and evaluate every one of their Venmo transactions? Probably not often. So yes, to your point, delete the app, or at the very least limit your use of the app and go to cash for a period of time, because there is nothing that will teach you how to value how much you have and how much you're spending more than actually using tangible cash. I mean, this is part of the reason that Dave Ramsey became so popular. And I'm sure you both are familiar with Dave, but some of your listeners may not be. Dave Ramsey goes to the all cash model, where you're just using cash to pay for things. And the whole reason it's done is it teaches you the tangibility of the money, where there are actually pain sensors triggering when you're handing over money, and you realize, oh, I'm looking at my grocery or my dining out envelope and there's not a lot of money in there. That's a painful thing. And I didn't realize just how powerful it is until I went to lunch with a good friend of mine, and he was probably in his 30s at the time. And he sat down, we were at a little Mexican restaurant nearby, and he sat down with a couple other friends, and we said, well, Brad, order something. We already ordered, go ahead and order. And he goes, no, I'm good. And it was literally like 12 o'clock, 10 after 12. So I'm thinking, well, you haven't eaten lunch yet, so just order something. And he goes, I'll just have a couple chips. I'm good. I said, Brad, seriously, order something. And he said, well, if I'm being candid, my dining out envelope's empty. And what that meant was throughout the week, he'd spent it all. He'd already been out to eat 4 or 5 times and probably spent his budget. And I said, Brad, do me a favor. Let me buy you lunch today. And he said, you would do that? I go, of course. And he goes, I will accept your lunch scholarship today. I will accept that. So there's like these tangible examples when you see it in action and you go, wow, it takes discipline to say, hey, no, thanks. I'm just going to drink water while I'm at this restaurant with all my friends. But here's what I want your listeners to really get is that, number one, if you make difficult choices, then life is easy. Right? Like when you make hard choices, life gets easier. When you make easy choices, life gets harder, specifically around money. If you make easy choices around money, swipe my debit, send a Venmo, not pay any attention really to what's coming in or going out, life's going to get hard real quick, right? And unless and until you start treating those decisions with the level of intensity and severity that they require, life's going to be hard for a long time. And the second message is this, and I tell students and my audience all the time, if you do for 2 years what most people won't do, you can do for the rest of your life what most people can't do. And for 2 years, my wife and I blasted away all of our debt. We lived on one income. It happened to be hers because she was my sugar mom at the time. It was a pretty good deal. She was making more money than I was, and she paid the mortgage and the utilities and our grocery bill. And all of my income went to blast away our debt. And so for young couples, especially, number one, get on the same page financially. And number two, don't be afraid to go at it with gusto about just knocking out your debt and living differently than everyone else does.
Yeah.
Because it is an amazing ride on the other side of that coin. We've built a really big life and lifestyle at the same time, and have carried very little debt throughout the whole process.
That is right there. That's some money, pun intended. Adam, the two things you shared, I can remember the first one. You're going to need to help me on the second one. Do the hard things. Life's going to be easy. Do things easy. Life's going to be hard around money. And then do for 2 years. Finish that. Say that again. Do for 2 years. What?
Yeah. If you do for 2 years what most people won't do, then you can do for the rest of your life what most people can't do.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a prime example. We graduated with a couple from college who ended up getting married a little bit earlier than my wife and I did. They bought a house before we did. They bought nice cars before we did. But we were living really virtually the same lifestyle, if you will. Same size homes, quality and size of cars, value of cars, et cetera. But for 2 years, my wife and I, when we went out to eat with them, we would share an appetizer, share an entree, and both of us would drink water. And then we would go home and we'd drink $2 Chuck back at home. You know what that's all about, Richard, don't you?
Yes, sir.
Cheap bottles of wine go a long way when you're young. Mm-hmm. And so we would do that, and we would spend like $20, maybe $25 on dinner. While our friends would go out with us, they would each get an appetizer, they would each get an entree, they'd each get a glass of wine, and they'd drop 60 or 70 bucks at dinner. And they would make fun of us, like literally ridicule us about, oh, you guys are so miserly and scrimping and saving. You got to live a little. Well, you fast forward a few years and we have no debt, no car payments, no student loans, no credit card debt, no consumer debt. The only thing we have was a mortgage, which we've since exhausted twice over. And you compare us with our friends who still have large car payments, still have a massive house payment, still are working to live, not living to work. And it's a way different scenario. And so what I'll tell you is that if you put yourself in a position when you're young that your future self is going to be in love with you, mm-hmm. you're going to live a great life. Mm-hmm. It's hard right now to live, mm-hmm. to scrimp and save and live on the cheap and use coupons. It's not sexy. But I'm telling you now, my wife pulls out her coupon book and I'm like, baby, you were so sexy when you do that. I can't even stand it. Because I know we're just practicing what we learned all the way along,
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's really good. I think for me and a lot of people my age, like that's one of the hardest things is the social pressure. It's like, I know like there's certain areas where I need to save, but my friends want to go play this golf course instead of this golf course or eat at this restaurant instead of that. And then it's this pressure of, okay, well, I can't have fun with my friends unless I go spend this money, and just learning to have that discipline of giving up stuff now for your future life. It's a good reminder.
Well, this relationship with money is the challenge. Like we don't know, we don't totally have like what the Venmo example is so great. And I fear of being that old guy that's screaming, get off my lawn. Like I want to be relevant. I don't want to be the, back in my day, but Adam, back in our day, we had cash or checkbooks, or we went into our bank and like our money was spent by money. And, I grew up on a farm and ranch. I was a 4-H kid. At 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, I'm writing, big checks for things that went to my, to my animals. And there was no such thing as Venmo. And when I got money, I received that and saw it. And I remember when Christian turned 16, we had a deal with all of our kids. We'll pay for half the car. You pay for half, we'll pay for half. And so we bought the car, and then he gave us money for his half. But when he was going to college, he decided he was going to get a different car. So he sold his car, got that money, and then was going to go buy this new car. And we had to go to the bank. And, not to out you, Christian, but, he's like, I don't think I've ever been in a bank. And here is an 18-year-old guy getting ready to go buy a car and had never had a reason to go in.
It's kind of nerve-wracking, honestly, like walking in, feeling uncomfortable, like, oh, I'm about to go live by myself and I don't know what to do inside of a bank. So I think that's another big problem with people my age is just not being educated with money being so simple and on their phones. I think and not teaching a lot of financial literacy and stuff in high school. A lot
Totally.
of people go to college and just are blindsided by everything money related.
You hit the nail on the head. Both of you did. There was a bank called Simple. And if you wanted to open a Simple account, you would literally get on your phone, plug in the details. Immediately the account's open. You can transfer money in from your phone, transfer money out, obviously, from your phone. You would never have to step foot in a bank branch ever, save for going to apply for a car loan, which anymore you could probably do over the phone as well. I think this illustrates an interesting point too, Christian, which is that, and I'm going to blame your generation's parents on this, but we raise our kids, and Richard, I know you're the same way. We want to raise our kids in a way where we protect them from challenge and harm, and struggle, candidly. And at some point in time, I realized that we had conflated the ideas of love and struggle. And I've heard parents say this, well, I love my kids. I don't want them to struggle. Mm-hmm. And I took a different approach. I was like, I love my kids and I want them to struggle financially, but I want them to struggle financially under my roof but between the ages of like 12 and 18. Because between 12 and really even before that, I want them to struggle with money between like 5 and 18. And the way we did that was we started giving our kids an allowance based on the chores they did at home when they were around 7 or 8 years of age. But then what we did was we said, okay, it's your money. You spend it how you see fit. And we would go into Target and they would say, I want to buy this Nerf gun. Well, the Nerf gun's $25. How much do you have? 18. Okay, and how much will you get every week? $7. Okay, so how many weeks are you going to have to wait before you get your Nerf gun? Another week, okay? And the week passes and they're like, well, maybe I really don't want that Nerf gun. Because now it's their money that they actually have to spend, right? Mm-hmm. And we did this all the way through their formative years, in essence, shaping their relationship to money where they make really good decisions. And to be 100% transparent, I told my kids, listen, I want you to have an MBA before you ever go to college. Mm-hmm. And the MBA stood for a massive bank account, because I don't want them to go and have $150 or $1,500 for that matter that they got from graduation, and that be it. And then them think that that's going to last them the entire semester with all their expenses. Yeah. So I said, let's set a goal. You need to have somewhere between $7,500 and $10,000 sitting in an account. You're going to save it yourself. You're going to get some assistance through jobs and scholarships and all that. I'm going to reward you for doing certain things. Like I pay my kids to read certain books, like Rich Dad, Poor Dad and the Cash Flow Quadrant and How to Win Friends and Influence People. I want them to read those books, and it's worth $100 for me to give to them to read books that will influence them for the rest of forever. Yeah. But what it boils down to is the idea that we are protecting our kids, or we think we are, instead of just like coaching them into a banking relationship or into a relationship with money and letting them evolve over a period of time, instead of just dumping them in from 18 to 22 and they pop out on the other side with 80 to 120 grand in student loans.
Yeah. Well, Adam, obviously I respect you immensely. I don't think in 20 years that we've been friends, I've ever had a conversation with you where you weren't bringing up the intentional parenting that you and your wife have. And so not just have I watched this, but there's like over 6 million people who have been privy to your parenting, because you have a TED Talk that's well over 6 million views on about money not being real and about an experiment that you did on your kids. Some people may call that child abuse. I call that hero status. So tell us a little bit about the impetus for your experiment and that TED Talk.
Yeah. Well, thank you, brother. I appreciate you mentioning it. I am blown away and blessed to have it be 6 million plus views. How it ever got there, I don't know. Other than maybe it hit a nerve with people. The TED Talk that you're referring to was about a game of Monopoly that I played with my kids. And before I go into the background and the backdrop of how it all came about, I have to say that I delivered that talk, and I was very fortunate to do so at the London Business School. So first of all, I was across the pond. I'm delivering it at LBS with super noteworthy people. And I'm feeling like a complete schmo. Like I am a dude from Iowa who played a game of Monopoly with my kids. So it was complete imposter syndrome anyway. But the game itself came about because my kids love to play Monopoly. And when we play, they tend to be like 6 to 8 hour games. They take forever. And the board would sit on the dining room table and we would play Friday night into Saturday or Saturday night into Sunday. And typically there wasn't even a winner. It was just like we got exhausted by playing the game and whoever had the most money would walk away the winner. And so one day they were playing and my kids were doing things just slightly out of the rules of the game. Like they were buying each other out of jail and they were loaning each other money to buy properties, not from the bank, but from each other. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, wow, this is very kind and considerate. I'm, super appreciative of the socialistic way we're playing this game. But at the core of Monopoly, the goal is to understand business. And I remember in the TED Talk, I said, what am I teaching these kids? And I got lambasted for it on YouTube. People are like, oh yeah, what are you teaching these kids? To be kind to one another. And that wasn't what I meant. What am I teaching them around money and how money is either real or fake? Because it seemed like they were just rolling the dice and playing the game, but they weren't paying any attention to the money that was exchanging hands and being done. So they were missing the economic lesson of it all. So I thought, I wonder if the money were real, would they play the game differently? And I did a quick, look up how much money do you start with? And it's $1,500 in starter capital. I estimated the bank would probably need $2,500 in cash. And so I went to my credit union on a Friday and I said, listen, I need these denominations of bills to total $9,990. And if any of you have been, around the banking industry, if you're below 10,000, then they don't have to do all the IRS paperwork. So they were like, thank you for not doing 10 grand. But I got $9,990 in all these denominations of bills. And then I went home and Sunday morning I set up a game of Monopoly with real cash, unbeknownst to them. And I said, hey, tomorrow morning we're going to play a fun game. Just you guys be ready. And my kids, I think, were 7, 9, and 11 at the time. And I mean, when I gave them each $1,500 in starter capital, their eyes lit up like it was Christmas morning, And it was amazing. We played a game that lasted, I think, 2.5 hours total. And it changed the way my kids played entirely, all because the money was tangible and real.
Well, what were some of those changes? What did they do differently?
Well, my daughter is, she always plays by what we call the luck strategy because she wants to play for chance and community chess cards. That's her whole reason for playing Monopoly, is to land on those spaces. My middle son always bought all the railroads, all the utilities, and then he would buy Boardwalk and Park Place. This is sort of like the ninja level Monopoly players rule book, if you will. Yeah, Richard, this is how Richard plays. And then my youngest son would buy everything that he lands on with no exception. Right. So he was like, he would land on it, even from the time he was 5 or 6 years old, he'd land on a space and he'd say, buying it. And we'd say, Davis, you have no money. You can't buy it. Don't care, buying anyway. And that's kind of how he's operated. So when they started playing with real cash, they started out kind of in the same vein. And then my one son shifted. He didn't buy Boardwalk and Park Place. He was buying all the cheaper properties. Like he bought Oriental and Baltic Avenue on the board. And that's right after you pass go. And he started leveraging those with houses and hotels, and people kept landing on him. He was, getting excited about how much rent money he was making on these properties. And I said to him at one point, hey, buddy, I'm curious, why did you buy those particular spaces? And he kind of laughed. He goes, Dad, they're just more affordable properties. At which point I cried a solitary tear of pride because I was like, he's getting it. This is amazing. And he's leveraging up with houses and hotels, and it was less expensive, but he's getting rent money. And then my youngest son, instead of buying every single thing that he landed on, he was counting how many spaces ahead either his mom or myself or his brother or sister owned properties. And then he would ask, How much is the rent on this? How much is the rent on this? How much is the rent on this? And then he would recount his money. So it was much slower when he rolled because he was being super conservative with his money. And we got done, and my middle child, my oldest son, won the entire game. He had $6,800 in cash. He had 27 properties. And after he was done, he learned the meaning of the phrase "making it rain" because he did this to his brother and sister. It was pretty awesome. But I said at the end, "Buddy, what did you learn?" And he said, "I learned that when you invest in lower cost properties, you can leverage up faster and you can bankrupt everyone around the table that much faster." And I said to my younger son, "Hey, what did you learn, buddy?" And he said, "At one point, I had lots of houses, but no cash." And I said, "You are what we call house rich and cash poor." And this is a lesson, right? People, Richard, you've probably heard this before. People are house rich and cash poor when they buy too much house and they don't have enough money left over to buy furniture for their house. Mm-hmm. And then my daughter, I said, "What did you learn, Piper?" And she said, "I love having cash in my hand, Dad." That was all she said. "I love having cash." And I go, "I know you do, sweetheart." And she always has a $50 bill or multiple 20s squirreled away in the back of her cell phone case, just in case of an emergency. She's always got money. And this is how she operates. It's always squirreled away. She's always got it there tucked away for a rainy day. And so we got done, Christian, to answer your question officially. We got done, and I said to my wife, "What did you learn?" And she said, "They are way more conservative with their money than they are with ours." And I go, "Oh, that's true." Because wouldn't you agree, Christian? Easier to spend your dad's money than your own.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Well, you're exposing the psychology of money, really, is what you're doing with this game and with your story and with your TED Talk, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And we realized that what we wanted to do was empower our kids to make really good financial choices. And I had read, there was a National Center for Leadership did a study years ago that they've redone a number of times over, but they will study young leaders in a role who have risen through the ranks quickly. And they'll say, "Hey, what was it about your upbringing or your formal years that really put you in the position you're in?" And they would say, "We were forced into a leadership role early, and we had great coaches and mentors alongside of us that helped us make good decisions." So they may have been put in a precarious situation, but they had people alongside that were guiding and coaching and mentoring them that helped them make the right decision. And I started thinking about this in addition to the conversations I'd had on college campuses, where I would meet an 18-year-old or a 20-year-old whose parents were still making all the financial decisions. And they would say, "I have no idea what a credit score is. I have no idea if I should have a credit card or not. My grandma gave me $2,000. What should I do with it?" They just had no clue. And that whole idea of my parents are still making my financial decisions at 20 or 22 or 25. And I know parents who have kids that are 30 years old that still financially support their kids and older. Mm-hmm. And my dad had a theory when I was growing up. Checkout time is 18 at noon. You know what I mean? Like, you're done. It would cut off. And so I wanted to raise my kids in an environment where they were financially stable and solvent and able to stand on their own 2 feet at 18. And the way we started doing that was, giving them money from the age of 7 or 8 until they were 13 or 14. And by that point in time, they already had hundreds and in one of their cases, at least thousands of dollars in the bank. And they were making money part-time in a job. And I was like, "You don't need money from me because you're self-sufficient. So I'm going to give you all the food, all the clothing you need. I'm going to cover your car insurance, but you're going to cover gas. I'm going to pay for your cell phone policy, but you're going to buy your cell phone. You're going to buy your computer, right? So I'm going to provide most of the necessities, but you're going to provide the things that you use on a daily basis." And my kids have done it from the time they were 13 or 14, and they're amazing with money, all 3 of them.
Yeah, I think all of this is showing just how important financial education inside of the home is, and not so much in the schools. Like, it feels like you go to school and you never hear about any of this. And I guess I'd be curious, like, to a kid who's maybe 16 or 17 and their parents didn't raise them teaching them these things, but they're starting to realize the importance of it. Like, how can they, like, what are some resources and ways that they can, teach themselves how to be financially responsible?
Yeah, great question. There are obviously blogs and podcasts and YouTube channels galore that will help teach financial literacy. And the one thing I would say, Christian, to your listeners who are in that boat where their parents really haven't taught them a lot, maybe even they're in a house where money is very secretive. Because there are some families that are like, we don't talk about that. We don't talk about what we make. We don't talk about what things cost. You don't need to worry about that, right? It's all kept very hush-hush and behind the curtain. I'm the exact opposite. My kids know about everything. I'm an open book. So for those that are interested in learning more, but maybe don't have access to it at home, go into communities like Bigger Pockets. Bigger Pockets is an online community full of people who are doing real estate investing and financial literacy. That community will welcome you with open arms. There's another community called Sheiks Freaks. Dan Sheiks was a DECA and FBLA teacher in Cherry Creek School District in Colorado. And he started this community of young people who are all doing freakishly cool and different things with their money. And now they have other people that learn from them on that front in the Sheiks Freaks community. And last but not least, I would say, if you are interested in learning more, read one book, maybe 2 books or more if you want, but 1 or 2 a year on your money will make a huge difference as you go forward. And those books could be, go to any Barnes and Noble or get on Amazon and look up financial literacy. I guarantee you it'll be things like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, The Cash Flow Quadrant, Think and Grow Rich, The Wealthy Barber, The Richest Man in Babylon, my book, Mastery of Money for Students. I have another book called Winning the Money Game. All of these books are great just as an introduction to money. And once you start learning and doing the right things, it kind of becomes addictive. You want to learn more and more. The last thing I'll say on this is, I like to call this the pursuit of mastery. And when you're in pursuit of mastery, it is like climbing a mountain that has no peak. So you may be in the foothills or even lower right now. You're in the valley. But as you start to climb the hill, know that there's more and more and more to learn as you go. So right now, maybe just get really good at building the right habits. Get really good at couponing. Get really good at buying and reselling stuff on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist to make money and do it in a really creative way. And then down the road, get really good at stock market investing and buying real estate. And then you'll learn about life insurance and the power of life insurance in your life, and alternate investments like oil and gas and all the like. This is a never-ending mountain. And if you get really excited about it, it can take you to places you can't even imagine.
Yeah. I think one of the most misquoted scriptures in the Bible of all time is, people say money is the root of all evil. But that scripture actually is the love of money is the root of all evil. And
right.
What you've been talking about, Adam, is about this relationship. So I love my kids. I love my family. I love my wife. But it's my relationship with them and the desire for health that is so important. And so having a good relationship with money is really, really important. And putting it in its proper space and place is critical. And the psychology around it. And a lot of times how we respond, I think, and what we show as our relationship says a whole lot about our past, then it definitely points to our future. So if you were to give any of I know you've got 1,000, yep. You could talk for 10 more hours on this, but if you had a few more money tips, is there anything else that you care to share with our listeners?
Yeah. One of the things that is probably the most prominent for me when I do any kind of programming around money is I will tell people that your money personality has been shaped since you were about 9 years of age. And this, sometimes this throws people off because we start talking about the formative years, when you're 0 to 9 and your parents are teaching you all the fundamentals, and you may not even know what they're teaching you. You're just picking up on it at a subconscious level. One of the things we're picking up on as kids are things that our parents say, around money. They're saying things like, money doesn't grow on trees and we can't afford that and we're broke. And, my mom said something when I was like 6 or 7 years of age that made me become an entrepreneur, in my opinion. My dad came home from work. I didn't know this at the time, but told my mom, hey, I may be getting laid off. They're closing this division of the company. And my mom, I overheard her say something like, well, your dad had a bad day at work and he could be out of a job and then we won't have a place to live. And I thought that that happened like this, that you could lose your job and not have a place to live in a week. And it made me become an entrepreneur, I think, because I didn't want to trust a company that they would hold my future in their hands. And I hated the idea of debt because I didn't like the idea of bad debt being held over my head. I like leverage, but I like leverage for cash flow's sake, not for vehicles and even my mortgage to a certain extent. And I think that message shaped who I am and how I am today. And so know this, you've got to dig deep into your own money story a little bit. And the way you do that is you ask yourself the question, what is my earliest money memory? And so, Christian, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Can I?
Yeah, go for it.
So every one of us has this memory, and it's pretty prominent, but it's the first money memory you had. So it could be anything from your childhood years. It could be an allowance. It could be a trip you took where your mom or dad gave you money. But what would be an early money memory that stands out for you?
In terms of a specific memory, I'm not sure if I have like an exact moment, but when I think of my childhood, like I definitely think of things that I wanted to buy and not like you were saying with your kids, not being able to buy them, and then asking my parents, how can I work for some money? And so I think just being in the store and seeing something that I want and my parents saying, okay, you have to pay for that. And then me realizing at 8 years old, oh, I only have $12 in my wallet. Like all of a sudden it hits a little harder.
Interesting. And here's the deal. That is probably a vastly different experience in a positive way, maybe in a negative way when you're a kid, but a positive way down the road, where there is a consequence to not having enough money to buy what it is you want. And if you see a kid screaming in Target today and their parent just capitulates and like gives it, fine, get the toy, get the doll, get the whatever, what they're doing is they're teaching that child, A, instant gratification, B, if I pitch a fit, I'll get anything I want, and C, I don't have to have the money to get it. Because in many of those cases, and I'm painting with a broad brush, but in many of those cases, the parent's probably putting it on a credit card. They don't even have the money, but they're just trying to quiet their kid. And these are the money stories that we grow up with, but it seeds and impacts who we are with money down the road. Yeah. So number one is your earliest money memory, and number two is your relationship to money. And the best way to articulate this, and I'm going to again put you on the spot, Christian. If money came to your door and it was personified, so money is actually a human being personified, and it came and it knocked on your door, and you open the door and you see money there, describe money for me. What does money look like if it's personified?
I think the words that come to mind are peace and stability. At least that's what I want. That's what I would want money to be for me.
Yeah. Yeah. What is money, male or female for you?
I don't know. I guess male is what comes to mind first.
Male. How is this male dressed?
Very sharply. He looks good. He's got
Sharply
a suit
dressed. Got a suit on. Okay, good. About how old is this person? If money is a person.
I would say they're older. They're full of wisdom, like 50 to 60 years old.
Okay, good. So here's what's interesting. And I'm going to pick this apart just a little bit because this is the kind of work that I love to do, to really start to articulate what is someone's view of money, vision of money, and relationship to it. So you said security, stability, peacefulness, right? Those are important values for you as it relates to money, or to what I would probably call abundance. Your ability to feel peaceful around money is there, right? That's what you're after. And I would assume that as you get older, as you go into your career, one of the things that will be important is you creating peace and stability around money with your family. Probably because I know your dad, and I know that's what was practiced at home, right? That's the model that you saw growing up. Now, the relationship to money is interesting in that the person is older and wiser. They're wearing a suit. What that might suggest is you won't have peace and stability until you're much older. And I'm not saying that's exactly what it is, but subconsciously, what if that relationship to money is someone that's maybe 3 or 4 years older than you? Not exactly where you're at, but a little bit older, not significantly older. Because what we're trying to do is bring money, peace, and security and safety and comfort closer to us. Because we can have wisdom. It doesn't necessarily require lots of years under our belt around money. So that's where I start to really massage what it looks like for other people. Because some people candidly will say, money is this nameless, shapeless figure that when I go closer to it, it goes farther away. One dude told me money is a really hot chick at the other side of a bar that I'm scared to go talk to.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, that requires some unpacking. Mm-hmm. But there's so many different answers, and all of it is somewhat suggestive of what you grew up with and what you view into the future, your relationship with money to be.
Well, yeah, that's a really powerful exercise. I can tell. This has been awesome. This conversation, I've learned a lot myself, and I'm going to be unpacking this after and everything. And one thing that we really want to make a priority on this show is leaving our listeners with an action step or two. That we've talked a lot about ideas that we can start implementing into our lives, but we want people to be able to, be done listening to this, and by the end of the day, they've done something to further their lives or their careers. So if you were to give one action item, whether that's creating a budget, deleting Venmo, whatever that is, what would you tell somebody to do today?
Well, the absolute easiest first next step to do would be to, since we're talking about apps, is go get the Acorns app. The Acorns app rounds up your spending and deposits whatever that excess is between, the $3.19 and $4. It's going to take that amount and put it into an investment account for you. So if you don't have the right habits right now, an app like Acorns is going to help you begin to develop the habit of saving money. That's number one. Secondly, what I would tell your listeners to do is go grab one book on money and read that book. One book alone can begin the process of changing your financial future forever. For me, it was Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. For you, it might be something completely different. But go read one book on your money and see what you can do out of that book to begin to change some of your financial life. One book for me was all it took to begin this years-long journey that I've been on of creating financial freedom and security and stability for myself and my family. So I gave two, but those two are pretty simple.
Well, you're an overachiever
Awesome.
that way.
I appreciate it.
Yes, you are. This has been so fantastic. I think that personally, at my stage in life, I gained insight, and I know Christian did. Our listeners in particular, they're hungry young professionals who really want to turn these big ideas that they have into action. And so we are grateful, super grateful for you, for your work, for you being a part of this podcast. We're going to let listeners know now you're going to hear more from Adam. Our goal here is not to have hundreds of different guests, but to go deep and wide with several. And we're going to pull Adam into multiple conversations. So Adam, I think you're one of the richest people I know. And it's not because you have a big and beautiful bank account, but you have a big and beautiful life. So we love you, man.
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate that. And I love the time. I love what you guys are doing. Keep up the good work. This is much needed.